And so what happened is that people then generally say, look, there's three different ways you look at the book of Revelation. And one they call the preterist view. The language in some of these terms, I've never heard that word before in my life. But it's basically people who look at it and think all of the book of Revelation is about the church under the Roman Empire, and it's all occurred. And it's got nothing really to tell us about history right now.
Okay.
That's preterist. The second one would be the idealist view, which it's telling us ideas and things that are going on. But you shouldn't really look at history right now to think this is something that I'm going to see in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
So preterist, all about Rome, it's done. Idealist, it's all ideas, it's not something that's going to happen right in front of us. And then the third one is futurist, which is like the stuff that John was told was kind of irrelevant to the church he wrote it to.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't nothing to do with their time. It's about a time, strangely enough, our time now when we're reading is what futurists would view. I guess from the way I've explained it, you can tell I'm not convinced that's the best way to read it. But for me, I think actually all three of those have got a lot of overlap.
Mm-hmm.
And a better way to think about how do you understand the book of Revelation is precisely what you've said. The better thing is to say, are you going to read Revelation and look at the images in it back to where they were first used in the book itself of the Bible,
mm-hmm.
in the Old Testament, particularly in Zechariah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Daniel, Exodus narrative, Garden of Eden. Are you going to look there, or are you going to say, oh, this is an image that I think I can understand on my own? And what we're trying to advocate for is real sort of kingdom theology, which is God has never changed his plans.
Mm.
He's never going to change his plans in the future. And actually, he's very rarely changed how he speaks to people. In Hebrews says, in the early days, he spoke through prophets, but now he's spoken through his son. But if you look at the way he speaks, it's often, look at me, you're doing well, like, here's what I want from you right now, and have hope.
Yeah.
And it's sort of this slightly veiled, riddling kind of way that he speaks, so you can understand if you push in, but you can also ignore. And you see that all the way through.
Yeah.
So I think that's the main question of, we want to encourage you to read Revelation, and every time you see an image to think this is probably an Old Testament image, go find out what it meant in the Old Testament. That will help you understand what it means now.
Yeah, and I suppose maybe just off the back of that, kind of pushing in a little bit more. I mean, we've laboured the point, but kind of the purpose of the letter, the purpose of the communication is to encourage and to produce faithful endurance.
Yeah.
There's not really a sense that it's coming to produce absolute understanding of a chronology at a certain point in time, is there?
It's not so that they can kind of, predict the right, choose the right lottery numbers on a particular date. It's not like the film Back to the Future. Like,
yeah.
You now know exactly what's going to happen when. It's not that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's to cause you to live faithfully like the Lamb in this time.
Yeah. Yeah. So having laid out some of those guardrails, we got our balance a little bit. I mean, a lot of us will read these chapters, the ones that we're looking at today, 11 to 19, and kind of go, what?
Yeah, so this is tricky stuff, and we should just be totally upfront with that.
Yeah.
And, we're just going to try and give you some real headlines of understanding for these. So think about the way that God speaks. So remember, what we're doing here is not saying this happens, that happens, that happens, that happens, that happens. Like, it's not... As we've used, I hope it's a helpful metaphor, like, you're not at a wedding in a foreign language where you're looking at the order of service. Oh, that's happened, right, this is going to happen next. You're much more in a multi-layered presentation of truth about what's going on. So chapter 11, chapter 12, and chapter 13 are all three, I think, three different illustrations of exactly the same thing.
Okay.
And they're illustrating a truth about this time in which we live. It's not one happens, then the next happens, then the next happens. It's like, here are three different illustrations of how we're now living. Like where Jesus would tell three different parables all about the same thing.
Yeah.
The kingdom of God is like a net. The kingdom of God is like a seed.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that's being said, but three different images.
Yeah. Lost coin, lost son, lost sheep.
So the first image is of two witnesses with a beast fighting against them. Just chapter 11. Chapter 12 is there a woman who gives birth to a son, and a dragon tries to kill the son, and then he gets really angry and tries to spit out a torrent against the woman. And the third one is about a beast, and then there's another beast, so two beasts, one from the sea, one from the land, who try and wage war against the church, commanding everyone to worship the beast and requiring that they wear its mark. And so this is where the mark of the beast comes in. Okay, so these are three images of the same thing, and these are three images of what John said are ours in Jesus. He said the three things we have in Jesus are the kingdom, faithful endurance, and tribulation. Okay, so tribulation, it's hard time, challenge, like battle. That's what it means. And so these all tell us the ways that the enemy will fight against you. Three different images, the same thing but different slants. So the first one shows you that in this time in which you're living, in which the early church was living, there will be a war against you by demonic forces, represented by the two witnesses and the beast, and they hate you. Now, the first thing is they will try and cause physical harm to the church. So the two witnesses represent the church, and they are physically killed by the people of the world, and the people of the world gloat over them. So you should expect in this time that you'll see Christians in the world who are being physically harmed by others, and that people are then gloating over their death. That's the first thing, physical harm. The second thing is that you should expect there to be a torrent of accusation and deception coming towards you, which will most likely be in your head. So this is what we see with the dragon, who incidentally is the snake from the garden on steroids. Okay. The snake in the garden was given power and authority by Adam and Eve, by them handing it over to him, and he's grown from a snake into a dragon. It's the same image, just on steroids. And this tries to do to us the same thing he did to Adam and Eve, but he makes accusations against us on our identity, and are you really? Does the Lord really love you? And tries to deceive us into sin, in exactly how he did to Adam and Eve. So first one is physical harm caused to you. Second one is mental challenge, like accusation and lies. And the third one is governmental and structural coercion to try and force you to adopt the values of the age. So this is the beast, the mark of the beast. Like you can't buy or sell, you can't do anything unless you adopt these things. Okay. So the three challenges of the church in this age, just to really lay this point and recap, are number one, how are you going to cope with physical harm and threat? Number two, how are you going to cope with your own mental challenge, your own sense of I'm not worthy, your own sense of I feel tempted to go off and do this thing. And third is, how are you going to cope with a government and a society that's trying to coerce you and make you live by its values, not by the worship of Jesus?
And we've said before that the end times started with Jesus and his death and resurrection, and they've gone all the way through up to us now. So we've seen these dynamics of physical threat, mental challenge, and government coercion in the church that John was writing to, their experience, all the way through church history and up till now.
And there'll be ebbs and flows of it. But, the 20th century, I think, had more martyrs than all the previous, that we know of. All the previous centuries combined. So the kind of physical harm was coming. At this present moment, in this nation at least, the number of Christians with significant mental health challenges, which are coming at them in a way that really cast doubt on themselves, and really that's a massive thing that's going on at the moment. And kind of government coercion thing. If you look at what's happening in the last nation, in China, Cambodia, Somalia, Eritrea.
And you read church history, you don't have to read many pages before you come across all three of these things going through. So that kind of starting point where we were like, what on earth is this about? To you and me and people watching, there is a sense, very real sense. It's about us. It's about where we are now.
It is, and again, something that we've tried to stress is that this isn't different from anything that Paul writes about, James writes about, Peter writes about, the Gospels are about. This is what the prophet Daniel predicted would happen. When you live in exile, this stuff goes on.
Yeah.
And will you tool up so you can live with faithful endurance and actually do that in a way that is living like the Lamb? Or will you become, as unfortunately the church has become, the church has said, right, we're going to endure, and the way we're going to do that, we're going to fight the world with its own game. And they stop acting like the lamb who was slain, and they start saying, let's go like a lion. Yeah, we're going to... And it's just...
It becomes beastly.
Yeah. And the church becomes a beast. And we've seen that certainly in the Western European Roman Empire.
Yeah.
But other nations all the moment. And is that what's happening in America right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So we see these challenges. What hope is these?
This is the reality. And in each of these images, you'll see that God acts to protect and guard his people. So in chapter 11, with the two witnesses, he doesn't stop them getting killed, but he then, after a period of time, they're raised from the dead. So I don't personally know any Christians who've been killed. But you may do. And certainly across the world, across church history, there'll be millions of Christians who will know somebody's been killed. And what God says is, well, they'll be raised from them. They'll be raised. And the church corporately will be raised. So if you're killed, you will be raised. Secondly, in the image of the woman and the dragon who's trying to pour torrent of abuse and bile, as it were, on the church. Actually, what happens is he gives the church wings to flee to the wilderness, and this is one of the weirdest things: the earth itself rises up to take the torrent that's coming out of the dragon's mouth, so it doesn't totally hit the church. So, what do we make of that? Well, first of all, some people would say that the church fleeing to the wilderness is an image of Exodus. The Israel flee captivity and Pharaoh and go through the wilderness. So there's something that's like, maybe that's symbolic. Certainly there was the early church when Jerusalem fell, a lot of them fled to the wilderness. And they so physically this can occur as well. They just physically leave and say... but the most interesting part of it, I think, is that God causes this earth to soak up quite a lot of the deception and accusation that God brings. Now, a very practical application of this would be, if you feel like you're having a bad time mentally, if you feel like you're getting really stuck in your own head, what do? Go for a walk in creation. It's just amazing thing that when you look at the world, just even that something of it seems to soak out of you some of this sort of internal challenge that is being brought. Super simple thing.
Amazing.
And the third one is, it says this requires wisdom. When you're in the mark of the beast, it requires wisdom. Where do you get wisdom from? The Lord. So you pray for wisdom. And God puts in the church teachers and preachers and encouragers and prophets and people who will actually say, let's hold strong.
So we've got resurrection. Which kind of trumps any physical harm that could possibly come. We've got the earth itself absorbing some of the attack and some of the bile. And we've got wisdom from the church, which the Lord gives. That they're three big ways how we overcome. And
the main thing is that you should note is that none of these three things are, hey, you're strong enough. You do it. It's all just rely on the provision God's made.
And that's for me one of the big things where the level's raised, where the advert break comes in and you kind of see what's actually going on. It feeds your heart with hope, doesn't it? Because the Lord's in control. It's like suddenly you see the one who's moving. I mean, just before we move on to some of the other chapters, a lot of people would read chapter 12 with the woman and the dragon as a kind of nativity, the heavenly perspective of the nativity of Jesus coming, Jesus come to earth. Would you go with that?
I think, I mean, the son of the woman is fundamentally and clearly Jesus. Now, the woman is the people of God. Israel, the people of God, and he's born. Yeah, so I think that's just totally legitimate and right.
Go with it. Well, let's go on in some more of these chapters, 4 to 19, and where we've maybe looked at Ezekiel and Daniel quite a bit before. These ones really take us into Exodus language, don't they?
And this is so helpful for just sort of demystifying it a little bit. Think of all the images you get in the book of Exodus, and then read this through. So, chapter 14, verse 1, you come straight across the lamb. What's the lamb got to do with the Exodus narrative? Mm-hmm. It's the Passover. The blood of the lamb is sacrificed to bring freedom for the people. Yeah. So we're looking at how Jesus acts as God's agent to set people free from the physical and spiritual oppression in which they stand. Yeah. Just instantly. Yeah. Verse 8 talks about Babylon. Now, Babylon is the city which is used sort of symbolically to represent human power used in a way that is not how God would want it to be used. Mm-hmm. So the Tower of Babel is people saying, hey, we want to do this on our own, for our own purposes and our own glory. Yeah. Babel becomes Babylon. Babylon absolutely clearly becomes Rome. Right. So, and then not just Rome, but any city, any nation state, actually even company that is human power used for their own glory, for their own ends, in a way that is away from the things that the Lord has said is right, is Babylon, is Egypt. Mm-hmm. The mark of the beast, you can't do anything without that. Very similar linguistically to you have to make bricks from straw. Like there's this obligation that's imposed on you by the ruling power that this is what you have to do. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The grapes in the winepress, verse 20, and blood flowing again is a link to Passover. Anything with blood, anything with flowing waters also brings up the idea of the Red Sea and that kind of the liberation that's brought there. The 7 last plagues, chapter 15. Obviously, you have the plagues in Egypt that God used to set people free. Chapter 15, verse 3 explicitly says it's the song of Moses. Mm-hmm. Moses, it's actually Miriam, but it becomes known as the Song of Moses. Miriam sings the song once they've passed through the Red Sea, and it's a song of that horse and rider he's cast into the sea. Yeah. Like our enemy has been defeated. And that's the song. And then 16, verse 16, the gathering of demonic hordes at Armageddon is again, it's reminiscent of where the armies of Pharaoh come and they think they've cornered Israel by the Red Sea. Yeah. And that's what Armageddon is. It's like the spiritual version of the Pharaoh's soldiers coming. Yeah. And what happened to them? They got washed away in the Red Sea. What's going to happen to the demonic horses? The hordes, they're going to be washed away by the power and a sovereign act of God to destroy them. Yeah. So hopefully not getting too bogged down in it, but just going back to where we started with some different ways to look at Revelation. So with all this Exodus language, is it saying that the church in John's time was going through another Exodus? Is it saying that spiritually this is what's always happening? Is it saying there's going to be an Exodus at some point in the future? What are we looking to? We're looking at it's for the whole earth. In fact, for the whole of the whole cosmos. Okay, so whereas something in Exodus, the people of Israel, a very particular time, particular place. Yeah. Revelation shows us this is global. This is, and it's global in the heavenly realms and in the earthly realms. So no longer is Pharaoh a human being. The real Pharaoh is the devil. Okay. No more are the armies of Pharaoh real human beings. The armies of Pharaoh are the demonic powers and principalities that work together with them. And it's the whole of creation is going to be liberated. Yeah. That's what we're looking at. Yeah. Now, this is occurring because Jesus kicked it off. Yeah. But the destruction of the demonic power, like this sort of the Red Sea moment, hasn't yet occurred. Yeah. We know that. We know the spiritual evil is present. And because spiritual evil is present, it influences humans to act in evil ways. Mm-hmm. Okay. So is it helpful to use the kind of
it happened, and it's happening, and it will happen.
Yeah, so I mean, we're really helped out by the now and the not yet of the kingdom language. So Jesus has already begun this. He already bound Satan on the cross. And he saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. He saw like a real disempowering of Satan when Jesus came and beat him in the wilderness and then died. And so this reality of almost like the plagues have occurred in the cross on the demonic powers. Jesus got rid of lots of them, but he didn't destroy those demons. He just took them out of people and sent them to a place where the Father had planned. And those demons are still around.
Yeah.
Those powers and those forces are still present. And so it has happened, it's begun, but the big destruction of evil hasn't occurred. So we have a now and a not yet reality.
Yeah. And that's where we're living.
That's where we're living. And so because of that, you get these three challenges.
Yeah.
You get physical harm, you get mental temptation and deception, and you get the reality of oppression.
Yeah. Yeah. Governmental legislation. So that's kind of 14, 15, 16, big exodus.
And it carries through. So then what you get is sort of chapter 17 gives you a little, and look, let me just be, this is John writing to the church saying, look, let me just really, really be clear. Rome is Babylon. So there's a couple of verses here that are really worth putting up, because this is a moment where you think, unambiguously, this is John telling the church he's writing to. Just so you guys know, I'm talking about Rome.
Yeah.
So do you want to read those? I think we've got chapter 17, verses 9 to 10 and 18.
So 9 to 10, this calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen. 1 is, the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain only for a little while. The beast who once was and now is not is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. And
then verse 18 of the same,
the woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth.
Yeah. So this is a different woman. This is a prostitute. It's not the woman from the previous chapter. So what he's really saying is, look, you're living in the midst of this. This is Rome.
Yeah.
And the 7 hills, Rome was famously built on 7 hills. And Rome is the city that's famous for ruling over all the nations of the earth.
Yeah. So the guys who, first got the scroll or were listening in as it was read to the parchment, they would have been, he's telling us about Rome, isn't he?
Yeah. Now that doesn't mean that it's just about Rome, because you could now say, hey, this is true about another city, what's the new Babylon on this earth? And maybe it's not a nation anymore, maybe it's not a city, maybe now it's a corporation.
Yeah.
But it's never that is the thing. It's like they're just the current manifestation of this thing that's going on.
Yeah. And it goes on. 18 is titled in this NIV "Lament over Fallen Babylon," but there's songs of how this always plays out, how this great power of the earth always falls, always leads to destruction, isn't there?
So, if you come across somebody saying, hey, well, Bill Gates is the new Antichrist or whatever, well, you always want to take that with a pinch of salt, because there is not one person or thing that is that. It's like there's people who are influenced by, and these are the characteristics you would look for in a beastly ruler, corporation, city, nation. First of all is arrogance. Babylon, the lament of Babylon is being arrogant. Secondly, greed. Thirdly, self-sufficiency. I'm not just, there's a wonderful verse, I'm not one of these poor women who needs help. I'm self-sufficient. And comparison, I'm always wanting to be better or richer or beyond anybody else. Arrogance, greed, self-sufficiency, comparison. And this, of course, is always one that you also look at yourself and think, am I getting like that?
Yeah.
And faithful endurance is to refuse to get arrogant, refuse to give into greed, refuse to give into self-sufficiency, and refuse to be somebody who always compares yourself to others.
Well, let's go there. So that would be humility, walking in humility and meekness, generosity.
Yeah.
dependence
Yeah.
on the Lord and others.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, what's the opposite of comparison? I suppose it's gratitude, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, thank you
Yeah.
for what you've given me, who I am, and who you've put around me.
Yeah, and maybe service as well. I
Yeah.
mean, so something that the Lamb something that John really calls the church to do is to live like the Lamb.
Yeah.
And what did Jesus do? He didn't come saying better than you, he came to serve.
Mm.
And so, yeah, kind of gratitude and service of others.
Yeah. Yeah. And
including Babylon.
Okay. Yeah.
The church must be grateful and serve Babylon.
Mm-hmm. Even whilst it knows it's a
Babylon.
beastly power that's going to fall.
Yeah.
Yeah. So last little bit we're going to look at today, chapter 19. We get the rider on the white horse. Who's he? What's he doing?
Well, so this is, I think what we probably should see is this is an overlapping, this is a different way of looking at what we've just looked at.
Mm-hmm.
So we had the whole sort of Exodus way of talking about the end.
Yeah.
About how the beast or the dragon or the prostitute are destroyed. And now we look at it from a different perspective. And this is the one that really is sort of the climax. This is the final one, because this shows it's Jesus, the rider on the white horse. It's Lord of all lords, King of all kings.
Yeah.
And he just, with the sword from his mouth, brings destruction to evil. And actually, this is sort of, that's that moment.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Church, your Lord, your Saviour, he is the one who will bring everything to an end.
Yeah.
He won't need to fight. He won't need to lift his hands. Just a sword will come out of his mouth, destroy all evil. Those who are with him it's not even Jesus who captures them. You know, like in every movie, it's like the big showdowns between the chief baddie and the chief goodie.
Mm.
Jesus doesn't even fight the devil.
Mm.
He just says, get him, and somebody gets him. We don't even know who it is.
Yeah.
And they throw him in the pit of fire. So it's just that serene sovereignty of God.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Amazing.
So there's just two things in this chapter which is worth thinking on. Again, with all of this stuff, there's like, I'm going to tell you where I come from. I think I've considered this, and I think this is the best description. You see that there's two distinct fates that occur. Jesus brings about both of them. Actually, there's three fates. Jesus brings about all three of them, but in this chapter, it's about the fate of evil. The first is those who are on the side of Satan are killed. Secondly, Satan and the false prophet are thrown into a pit of fire, and they seemingly are forever tormented. So it looks like, and pundits would suggest, that spiritual beings, like Satan is a fallen angel, they cannot be ended. They are eternal in nature. So their eternity is to be eternally tormented in the fire. But those who aren't by nature angelic, human beings who've sided with and said, no, we don't want to do what you say, Jesus. We rebel against the idea that you're going to become king here. They're like the tenants in the vineyard. Like they're like people like, no, we like it our way and we don't want to do it your way. They will be killed and destroyed, and they are not tormented forever. There's just a moment of destruction. So this is what might be called annihilationism, which I think increasingly more and more pundits say, yeah, do you know what, this probably does make sense, and that certainly seems convincing to me. So the idea is that for those who do not ever say to Jesus, actually, you should be king, we want your way of doing things to be the way that things are, then they are destroyed at the coming of Jesus, and they're gone forever. They're annihilated, which is fairly final language, isn't it? But the demonic powers, they cannot be. God won't go against his original creation, so they're not annihilated. They're just forever living separate from God in torment.
It's sobering, isn't it? And
this is a specific moment. So this is the return of Jesus.
Yeah.